The UK's lockdown has been extended until May, but even when the government does start to lift it, it won't be a return to normal life straight away. That's because millions of people will still be at risk of being infected with coronavirus. So the challenge is to find ways to gradually lift restrictions without causing a big spike in cases, which could overwhelm the NHS. So what could be the possible options to lift the lockdown? Could the lockdown be lifted by age group? This professor thinks allowing young people out of lockdown first would help get the economy going again.
Using age is a natural way to think about releasing the lockdown. If we let young people, say between 20 and 30, go back to their fairly normal lives and work if they can find work, that would be very safe for them. And of course, they are currently the hardest hit. So there's a natural logic to using age.
What about lifting the lockdown by region? Easing restrictions in part of the country where the virus has already peaked is another option, but it comes with problems.
Let's imagine that Gloucestershire and Oxfordshire were next to each other as they are, and one took off restrictions. I could see people trying to drive in the tiny roads through the night to go to the pub, to go to a restaurant. We simply can't put police officers on all the small roads in our country.
What about immunity certificates? At the start of April, Health Secretary Matt Hancock said the government was looking at certificates for people who had coronavirus and are immune from infection as a way to ease restrictions. But he warned that the science around coronavirus immunity isn't advanced enough yet.
I could see that immunity certificates might help in a release of those in lockdown, but presumably the numbers affected would be rather small. And my understanding is that at the moment we haven't got the science for sure right on immunity testing. So I think there's a big question mark over that channel.
What about an app? There is an app in development being worked on by the government and the NHS to help alert people if they've come into contact with someone who tests positive for the virus and lets them know whether they need to self-isolate. An app like this has been used by countries like Singapore and China to ease restrictions for the majority of the public while ensuring those who have the virus don't spread it. What about gradually easing the lockdown by sectors of the economy? This is something that some European countries have done as a way to start lifting their lockdowns.
Taking off restrictions from the lockdown sector by sector would have some advantages because we could prioritise the really important sectors, but it would be hard to choose which, and of course there would always be the background safety concern if older people were released.
In Spain, construction workers have been allowed back to work. In Austria, smaller shops have been allowed to reopen with rules on social distancing remaining in place. And Denmark has reopened nurseries and some schools. Large gatherings are still out of the question for now, though. The UK government will be watching closely how other countries are easing their lockdowns and what impact it has on coronavirus cases. It's a fine balancing act between protecting the health of the public while minimising the risk of long-term damage to the economy.